Previously on World History and Geography.
The cycle of dynasties had run through the Middle Kingdom for over 2,000 years. During the 19th century, the Qing dynasty struggled with internal revolts and the loss of control over its trade and economy to foreign powers. In the early 1900s, China was ripe for revolution. Many Chinese believed that modernization and nationalism held the country's keys for survival. They wanted to build up the army and navy, to construct modern factories, and reform education. Yet others feared change. They believed that China's greatness lay in its traditional ways. This debate over China's future would lead to the end of the Qing dynasty.
And now, our feature presentation.
Among the groups pushing for modernization and nationalization was the Kuomintang, or the Nationalist Party. Its first great leader was Sun Yat-sen. In 1911, the Revolutionary Alliance, a forerunner of the Kuomintang, succeeded in overthrowing the last emperor of the Qing dynasty. The last emperor of China was a boy named Pu Yi, who took the throne in 1908 at the age of 2. Wouldn't that be awesome to be the emperor as a 2-year-old? Anyway, the Qing had ruled China since 1644, but the dynastic cycle had been broken. By the way, that reminds me of the Dynasty Song.
Sheng Zhou Qin Han, Sheng Zhou Qin Han, Sui Tong Sun, Sui Tong Sun, Yuan Qing Republic, Yuan Qing Republic, Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong.
Hey, Republic and Mao Zedong aren't dynasties. We'll get to that later. In 1912, Sun Yat-sen became president of the new Republic of China. Sun hoped to establish a modern government based on the 3 principles of the people: nationalism, meaning an end to foreign control; people's rights, with democracy; people's livelihood, meaning economic security for all Chinese. Sun Yat-sen considered nationalism vital. Despite his lasting influence as a revolutionary leader, Sun lacked the authority and military support to secure national unity. Sun turned over the presidency to a powerful general, Yuan Shikai, who quickly portrayed the democratic ideals of the revolution. His actions sparked local revolts. After the general died in 1916, civil war broke out. Real authority fell into the hands of provincial warlords or powerful military leaders. They ruled territories as large as their armies could conquer, sort of like China's Warring States period a couple thousand years earlier. During World War I, China declared war on Germany, hoping that the Allies would return control of the Chinese territories belonging to Germany. However, under the Treaty of Versailles, the Allied leaders gave Japan those territories. When news of the Treaty of Versailles reached China, outrage swept the country. On May 4, 1919, over 3,000 angry students gathered in the center of Beijing, including Tiananmen Square, which would be the location of another famous student protest in 1989. But we'll get to that later. The demonstrations spread to other cities and exploded into a national movement called the May 4th movement. The Kuomintang also shared the aims of the movement, but they could not strengthen central rule on their own. Meanwhile, many young Chinese intellectuals turned against Sun Yat-sen's belief in Western democracy in favor of Lenin's brand of communism in neighboring Russia. In 1921, a group met in Shanghai to organize the Chinese Communist Party. Mao Zedong, an assistant librarian at Beijing University, was among its founders. Lenin had based his Marxist revolution on his organization in Russian cities. Mao envisioned a different setting. He believed he could bring a revolution to the peasants in the rural country of China. While the Chinese Communist Party was forming, Sun Yat-sen and his Nationalist Party set up a government in southern China. He shared the communist disillusionment with the Western countries and formed an alliance with the communists. Sun Yat-sen hoped to unite all the revolutionary groups for common action. After Sun Yat-sen died in 1925, Zhang Zhiqi, formerly known as Chiang Kai-shek, headed the Kuomintang. Zhang came from a middle-class background, and many of Zhang's followers were bankers and business people. Like Zhang, they feared the communist goal of creating a social economy modeled after the new Soviet Union. Zhang's government became steadily less democratic and more corrupt. Most peasants believed that Zhang was doing little to improve their lives. As a result, many peasants threw their support to the Chinese Communist Party. To enlist the support of the peasants, Mao divided land that the communists won among the local farmers. At first, Zhang put aside his differences with the communists. Together, Zhang's nationalist forces and the communists successfully fought the warlords. Soon afterward, though, he turned against the communists. In April 1927, nationalist troops and armed gangs moved into Shanghai. They killed many communist leaders and trade union members in the city streets. Similar killings took place in other cities. The nationalists nearly wiped out the Chinese Communist Party. In 1928, Zhang became president of the Nationalist Republic of China. Great Britain and the United States both formally recognized the new government, but because of the slaughter of the communists by Zhang, the Soviet Union did not. The communists' deep-seated rage over the massacre erupted in a civil war that would last until 1949. Mao and the other surviving communist leaders established themselves in the hills of south-central China. Mao Zedong recruited the peasants to join his Red Army. He then trained them in guerrilla warfare. No, not guerrilla, guerrilla. The Nationalists attacked the Communists repeatedly but failed to drive them out. In 1933, Jiang gathered an army of at least 7,000 men, then surrounded the Communist mountain stronghold. Outnumbered, the Communist Party leaders realized they faced defeat. In a daring move, 100,000 Communist forces fled. They began a hazardous 6,000-mile-long journey called the Long March. That is long. That's like going from New York to San Francisco and back again. Between 1934 and 1935, the Communists kept only a step ahead of Jiang's forces. Thousands died from hunger, cold, exposure, and battle wounds. Finally, after a little more than a year, Mao and 7,000 or 8,000 Communist survivors settled in caves in northwestern China. There they gained new followers. In 1931, as Chinese fought Chinese, the Japanese watched the power struggles with rising interest. Japanese forces took advantage of Chinese weakening situation. They invaded Manchuria, an industrialized province in the northeast part of China. In 1937, the Japanese launched an all-out invasion of China. Massive bombings of villages and cities killed thousands of Chinese. The destruction of farms caused many more to die of starvation. By 1938, Japan held control of a large part of China. The Japanese threat forced an uneasy truce between Jiang's and Mao's forces. The Civil War gradually ground to a halt as nationalists and communists temporarily united to fight the Japanese, as the world entered the Second World War.
Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong.